back to the Todd Brommelkamp Show right here on KGYM.
How good does that sound? I know it's Hail to the Victors, but how good does that sound to hear a college football fight song in July? That can mean only one thing. Welcome back to the Todd Brommelkamp Show, originating on 106.3 FM, the South Gym in Iowa City, 107.5 FM, the North Gym in Cedar Rapids, and all across eastern Iowa on 1600 AM. The countdown to kickoff is officially underway. Countdown to kickoff leading up to Big Ten Media Days in Chicago later this month. That's the 24th and 25th if you want to put it on your calendar. We'll be broadcasting live from the Hyatt Regency McCormick Place in Chicago both days. We hope to have Iowa football coach Kirk Ferentz with us, as he traditionally has in the past when we've been in Chicago. And we'll be taking a look at one school in the Big Ten each day leading up to Big Ten Media Days. Countdown to kickoff brought to you by Coach's Corner Sports Pub in Iowa City. And today, if Hail to the Victors didn't completely give it away, it's the University of Michigan. Josh Henschke from the Scout.com website that covers Michigan joining us now. And Josh, let's go ahead and start here. This is, even though year number 3 for Jim Harbaugh, it's sort of the year where things get real in Ann Arbor because he lost a ton of talent to graduation in the NFL last year.
Year for, Harbaugh to show that, he's got this team going places. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, the program is in it's in a much better place than when he inherited it. But again, this is where he's going to make his money because there's a lot of inexperienced talent on that team. It's definitely, you look down the depth chart and it's not void of talent by any means, but there's just not much experience there, and it's a lot of these young guys need to mature quickly.
Let's start with one of those inexperienced talent areas. With J.U. Jesson and Amara Darboh, as well as Jake Butt gone, who are some of the names to keep an eye on as far as weapons for Wilton Speight to throw to?
Yeah, I mean, you've got obviously the two biggest names that kind of stick out from the past recruiting class, and Tariq Black and Donovan Peoples-Jones. Many people are kind of slotting them into the 1 and 2 positions, and they're extremely talented. You saw it during the spring game that they're capable of extremely athletic plays, and that's something that Michigan needs and will utilize under Pep Hamilton as they go more kind of shotgun type of situations and kind of try to air it out a little bit more. You've also have kind of returning players that haven't really quite dug their heels in yet. You've got Mo Ways. He's been there for quite some time. Guys like Nate Johnson in the slot. Eddie McDoom, who is kind of really wasn't utilized as a wide receiver last year. He was kind of more of a jet sweep guy. They're expecting him to get kind of a more expanded role this year. So, like I said, there's talent there, but there's just a lot of inexperience that kind of, needs to show itself, especially with an opponent against Florida week 1.
What, in your opinion, will the running game look like for Michigan this year?
That's a good question because I think that all depends on the offensive line. Last year, you look at the offensive line and you look at how much experience that they had, and they really weren't impressive. There were occasions where you're like, okay, finally they're going to turn this around, and then towards the end of the year, especially against Florida State, they could not keep Speight upright. So is it a situation where it's an addition by subtraction where you've got these young guys that Harbaugh and Drevno have recruited in and kind of, coached up a little bit? We'll see. And then at the same time, you have to figure out if Michigan is going to go with a single running back group, which could be led by a guy like Chris Evans, who was kind of a surprise for Michigan last year. And then you also have someone like a Karan Higdon who, seemed like a nice 1-2 punch with Chris Evans, too. And then, obviously, you've got a guy like Ty Isaac, who's in his final year, who, again, kind of like the Mo Way situation, who needs to, dig in and really, make some plays on the field in order to get more snaps.
You mentioned the offensive line. So other than the Swiss Army knife, Mason Cole will probably be at left tackle, and the freshman All-American Ben Brebison, how much of a question mark is from the center to the right side of that offensive line?
Well, I don't think they've really found a combination yet that works. I think, that you've got guys like John Runyon, Pat Kugler, who's been there for a little while but has suffered through some injuries. So there's a little bit of question marks there. A guy like Michael Onwenu, who is like 350 pounds and is massive, he could be a good anchor there too. So I think they're on the right path of finding a group that works. It's just now it kind of needs to develop into something. And Michigan kind of really emphasized the offensive line group by replacing Tyrone Wheatley with Greg Fry, the tackles, who will be a tackles coach, and sharing responsibilities with Tim Drebno, who will be the guards coach. So they've really emphasized offensive line development in this offseason.
We're beginning the countdown to kickoff in Ann Arbor with Josh Henschke of Scout.com, the Michigan Insider. What, in your opinion, is the biggest question that the Wolverines have to answer before that September 2nd opener in Arlington against an opponent that Iowa saw in the Outback Bowl this year? The Wolverines open with the Gators.
Yeah, it's definitely not going to be an easy task by any means, but I think, outside of Michigan needs to replace so many previous starters. I feel like that's a cop-out of sense. But I think the defensive backs, for me, it's either 1A or 1B with the offensive line. But I think the defensive backs, considering what they lost, pretty much the entire defensive back group is gone. Jordan Lewis highlighting that group. I think, you're inserting young guys like who are probably going to be David Long and Lavert Hill as starters at corner. So there's a lot of experience and a lot of success that they're going to have to replace, and they're going to get picked on, and there's going to be some growing pains. So it's going to be a trial by fire because they didn't really see much playing time outside of the occasional garbage minutes. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with these guys out there, because they're going to get thrown out there, and even if it's not going to be Long or Hill, there's young guys behind them, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
The defense as a whole will have lost 10 starters from last year. Is there maybe one name from last year's team that Don Brown might miss the most?
Jordan Lewis, I'd say. I think Jordan Lewis by far. Anytime you lose an All-American corner, it's not easy to replace. You can make an argument for Jabril Peppers because he did so many things on defense, but replacing a corner that, it got to the point where teams didn't even want to throw at Lewis. So I think he's going to be the biggest name that they'll miss. Maybe, and you can make an argument too for a guy like Taco Charlton too, who's just, a big presence on the defensive line and so talented. And, I think those two guys, Don Brown's going to miss a lot this year.
Speaking of up front and Taco Charlton, you think back to 2015 when Jabril Peppers was a sophomore. That was really his breakout year. Could we be seeing a similar situation with Rashawn Gary moving into his sophomore season?
Yeah, I definitely think you could. There's enough guys on that defensive line, Brian Monet, Maurice Hurst, Chase Winovich, and a couple of other guys, Aubrey Solomon too, the 5-star recruit that Michigan's bringing in for 2017 class. I think there's an opportunity there for Gary to kind of take advantage of the double teams elsewhere, because you still have to watch out for Maurice Hurst. He had a pretty successful season in a backup type of role. Now he's thrusted into the limelight, so someone's going to be left unguarded because you're either going to have to double team Gary or double team Hurst. And I think Gary definitely, he's said all the right things. Coaches have been raving about him all off season, so there's definitely, an opportunity for him to break out in a big way.
Let's stick with Jabril Peppers here. Is there any player that can sort of fill that hybrid role now that he's no longer a part of the program?
Yeah, absolutely. They've got Khalik Hudson. He's very similar to Jabril Peppers in body type. I think he's actually more ripped than Jabril is, and that's saying a lot because Jabril was a pretty big guy for his size. So they've pretty much slotted Khalik Hudson into that hybrid Viper role. So I think he'll do very well. He had an excellent spring game. The sky's the limit for him, and I think he's going to have a great season.
How would you assess, as a whole, Wilton Spate's first season as a starting quarterback?
started off very strong, and then that shoulder injury he suffered against Iowa kind of just derailed everything. Had a really, I mean, for what it's worth, he had a gutsy performance against Ohio State. Yeah, he had 2 pick sixes and a crucial fumble in the red zone, but he started off very strong. Yes, the competition wasn't as great as it was towards the tail end of the year. I'd say it was good, not great. I mean, the team definitely had an opportunity to make it a great season, but they dropped the ball towards the end of the year. But, I think he did enough of the right things. I mean, he kept his interception ratio down, which is extremely positive. He made smart decisions with the football for most of the year. So that was positive too. So I think he's definitely got some room to grow for a guy who many didn't really think that Spate had a chance to even start. I think he did enough to put himself in the argument as a locked in starter for now.
When you take a look at the schedule, what one game sticks out to you the most as being important? Is it that opener September 2nd against Florida, or is it going to be somewhere in the Big Ten schedule?
Yeah, I think, you want to have a measuring stick game early on to see what your team is capable of. And I think Florida, that Florida game is a huge measuring stick game for that team because you're throwing a lot of young guys out into the fire early. And I think that is going to be huge. If Michigan can walk away with a win, I think that'll be huge for the confidence of the young guys going forward. And then, you've got Penn State, I think is going to be a very important game for Michigan. You're at Penn State, it's probably going to be a night game, and the atmosphere is always crazy down there. So I think that's going to be a big game. Michigan the past couple of years has had Penn State's number, but I think we're talking about a different Penn State team heading into this season. So I think those two, stick out right away. I mean, obviously Ohio State at the end of the year is going to be huge, but yeah, right at that beginning of the part of the season, that Florida and Penn State game stick out right away.
Which unit, either offensively or defensively, is going to be the biggest strength for this team?
I would still go with defense despite losing so much. I think, you can't rule out what Don Brown has done, through not just at Michigan, but throughout his career, and he gets the benefit of the doubt. Michigan still, they've got some returners. I mean, they've got some fast linebackers, which they haven't had in quite some time, and you started to see that last year. With Mike McCray finally healthy, and then you got Devin Bush, who's quick sideline to sideline and really can, hit hard too. So I say defense. I think the offense has got a little ways to go to catch up, but I think both can be good in time. They just need some time to gel with these young guys.
Who's the one newcomer that's most likely to leave the biggest impact on this team at the end of the season?
Oh, that's a good question. Me personally, I would say Tariq Black. I think what I saw from him from the spring game, I was left extremely impressed, and I think he was a little bit undervalued by most recruiting services just because of where he played his high school football. So my guess is my vote is going to be Tariq Black.
What have you heard, if anything, about Oliver Martin, a kid from Iowa City West High, right in our backyard? It was a big story in this neck of the woods when he announced that he was going to commit to Michigan and Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah, I think he's definitely got a shot to play this year. I think he's an excellent candidate for the slot position. They've got a couple of guys like Grant Perry, Nate Johnson, Eddie McDoom who can also play the slot. But I think, there's no one is guaranteed a redshirt year until you prove that you need a year of season. And I think, Oliver Martin has every opportunity to go out there and prove that he belongs. I mean, we've talked to Oliver and his family many, many times throughout the process, and Harbaugh loves the fact that he's a multi-sport player, loves the fact that he can play baseball. So, that type of athleticism and ability to do a bunch of different things, it really reflects highly on Harbaugh. So, he was excited that he landed Martin, and, I wouldn't be surprised if you saw him playing early on in his career.
Josh, I have to ask pretty much everybody that covers Michigan this question, but what is it like covering a program led by Jim Harbaugh and all the fireworks and the national headlines that come with it?
Well, I mean, they definitely Harbaugh definitely keeps it interesting, and that's the way I like it. I'm relatively new to the Michigan beat as a whole, so it's definitely exciting. It's better than the alternative. I was I think my first year covering Michigan fully was the last year of Brady Hoke, so we had that concussion scandal, Dave Brandon situation. So I'd much rather have what Harbaugh's brought to the program now than compared to what it was a couple of years ago, that's for sure.
Josh, we appreciate the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Josh Henschke of the Michigan Insider on the Scout.com network. The Wolverines, again, will be the next Big Ten team for the Florida Gators. They dispatched the Hawkeyes in the Outback Bowl. They'll take on the Wolverines in Arlington, Texas.